Hello and welcome to lecture 3.5. We're going to start adding some constraints. And basically what constraints are is that they make things work. So we're going to be adding some IK constraints to the arms so that we can actually use this hand to move the entire arm. We're going to add some constraints to the finger controller so we can actually rotate the entire fingers. And yeah, we're gonna add some cool stuff like that. So yeah, let's just jump into it. So first off, we want to select the lower arm L. It doesn't really matter which side we start on, but I'm gonna start with the left side. And make sure you're in pose mode. That's very important. Yeah, we need to be in pose mode. And go ahead and select the lower arm L. So this one. And then go to the Bone Constraint Properties tab here. And let's add the inverse kinematics. So add this one. And now we need to assign a few things here. So the target, we want the target to be our rig. So it's going to be arms rig. We want the bone to be the hand bone. We could also have named this the IK bone, but I feel like the hand controller bone works just fine. But yeah, so this is the IK bone basically, this one, hand controller. So let's select that one, hand control L. And the pole target is this one that we made before. So assign the rig and then set the bone, pole target bone, search for pole target L, which is the first one. And you can see that this kind of flipped upside down now, and that's normal. That's because we need to change the pole angle here. But first we need to actually fix the chain length. So set the chain length to 2 or 1. Let me try it. Nope, 2. Okay, so basically what the chain length is that it determines how many bones it should affect, right? So if we set the chain length to 1, it's just going to affect this bone. So, but since we want to move the whole arm, we need to set it to 2, because it's two bones. So we want it to affect both of them. And let's fix the pole angle now. So as we can see, it's kind of flipped. The thumb is over here. So let's check out which angle we should be using. Okay, we need to flip it by 180, like this. And now if we try it, you can test moving it, by the way, by selecting the hand controller bone. That is also the IK bone. And we can press G to move it. And now we can actually see that the arm is moving nicely here. And we're getting that nice bend, elbow bending here, which is very cool. Look at that. And the pole target works. We can test this by moving the pole target. Yep. So the pole target is basically the rotation of the elbow. So if we have it like this and we want it to be a bit more downwards, we can just move it like this. Very useful. So now we have this set up. So let's also make this one control the upper arm. And this is a bit more simple because we want the upper arm to copy this location of this one. So, and rotation, of course. So let's select the upper arm and add a new constraint. And let's call it copy, or let's choose copy transforms. And actually, no, we're not going to use that one. Let's use copy location. And then let's choose the rig and the upper arm control, L. And let's try it out. Okay, that follows nicely. So, and the next thing we want to add is we want the hand, so the hand bone, we want it to follow the IK bone. So currently it doesn't really rotate with the IK. So if we move the hand, if we move the IK bone, we can see that the hand doesn't really follow the IK rotation. And that's not good because we want this IK to be able to control the rotations, of course. So let's go ahead and select the hand bone here. Go to bone properties and turn off inherit rotation in the relations tab. So we don't want to get the rotation from the lower arm. We wanted this to be turned off. And now we can see, okay, if we move it, there's no rotation, but it still doesn't follow the IK bone, which we want. So select the hand bone again, and let's go to the constraints tab and add a copy rotation, just like we did with the upper arm, but the rotation instead. And choose the arms rig, and let's pick the hand control L, and let's try it. Okay, so that seems to be working fine. So basically we're just copying the exact rotation here of the world space rotation of the controller bone, and it's being replaced by that. Okay, that works just fine. And the next thing we want to add is the constraints for the fingers. So basically what we want is that when we rotate this one, we want the fingers to rotate as well. So we don't actually have to select each finger manually and kind of go in and, you know, rotate like this. I mean, we could do that, and to be fair, it could be useful for like more specific stuff, like if you want to add like a bit more detail or stuff like that. But for this purpose and this kind of low poly style look that we're going for, we don't really need that. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to add a copy rotation constraint on the first bone. So let's go ahead and select the first bone here in the finger and add a copy rotation, and then set the target to our rig. And we want to set the bone to this one, so the controller bone. So thumb control L, pick that one, and let's try it. Okay, so now if we rotate the thumb controller here, we can see that this whole chain is following, right? But what we want to do is when we rotate it down like this, we want these fingers to kind of curl, you know, like bending. We want them to bend according to the rotation. And to do that, we can go to the second bone, add a copy rotation, and basically just repeat this. So set the target to rig. And for the bone, instead of using this controller bone, we want to set it to the thumb 1. So we want to set it to this bone, the first thumb bone, and set the axis to X only, because we don't want it to rotate side to side or anything like that. We just want to get the kind of up X rotation. And set the target to local with parent, because these are child bones, so they need to be local with the parent. And let's try it. Okay, nothing happens. Let's try with adding instead of replacing. And there you go. Okay, so we needed to add the rotation instead of replacing the rotation, which makes sense because you're adding the rotation to the finger. So now if we try it again, we can see that it rotates, and there's some rotation being added as well down the chain here. So let's repeat that process again. And this time we want to set it to thumb 02L. So we want this bone, the third bone, to follow the second bone. And set the axis to X. and add and local with parent. So basically they're just kind of copying each other. So the last bone is being added onto by the second bone, and the second bone is being rotated by the first bone, and so on. And the first bone is being rotated by the controller. So it's just like a chain of rotation being added, which is pretty cool. We get this kind of nice motion here. We could actually tone down this a bit. Well, let's try this actually. Okay, so let's keep this one at local space instead of local with parent. So the third bone should be local space instead, because otherwise it kind of bends a bit too much. And now we get this. So it bends really nicely. We get this kind of smooth curve, or bending, I suppose. And let's repeat this process for the index fingers as well. So select the first index finger, add a copy rotation constraint, set the target to the rig, and add the controller bone. So index control L, and set it to, was it world space? Yep, world space. And then the second bone, copy rotation, index finger 01, so copy the first bone, disable Y and Z, and set it to add and local with parent. Or actually, I think local space is going to work just fine as well. Yeah, so let's just keep it at add and local space, and repeat this process for the last finger as well. So add a copy rotation, set it to arms rig, and index finger 02L, disable Y and Z, and set it to add local space. And now if we rotate the controller bone here, we can see that just like the thumb, it rotates really nicely, but it doesn't rotate on this axis, which makes sense, because if you try it in real life, you can't rotate your fingers like that, you know. But you can rotate them down, and that's how it's supposed to be. Now we have to repeat this process for each finger, so I'm probably just gonna speed up this in the video, but it's the same method as we used for the thumb and the index finger, but just repeat it for each finger. All right, and yeah, now I have added all the constraints here to the fingers, so it's all done. We can all rotate the fingers, and they should be rotating perfectly. Very cool, very cool. All right, and another thing we can do before we move on to the right side is we can actually lock these bones so that we can't move them like this, because the fingers shouldn't be moved. They should only be rotated. So select each controller bone, go to the bone properties here, and disable the location here by pressing the lock icon. And we can also disable the scale since we won't be using that. So lock that. And now we can actually, we can't rotate, we can't move them, which is good because we don't need to. And sometimes, you know, you kind of move them by accident or something. So it's good to keep them locked like that. So let's just repeat this for all fingers. And we can also do this for the hand, just disable the scale, because we won't be scaling the hand at all. And the same for the pole target, disable scale. And rotation, because we won't be rotating this one either. This is just going to be a scale or a location thing, so we won't be rotating it or scaling it. And finally, for the upper arm controller, we can also disable the scale, like that. All right, and yeah, now we need to repeat this process for the right side of the mesh or the armature. And I'm probably going to fast forward this because it's just the same process, but it's on the other side. So basically just repeat this, what we did here, but for the right side of the rig. So assign the right side bones instead of the left side bones. But yeah, I'm just gonna fast forward this, but it's the same as we did here, but for the right side. All right, and that's it. Now I've added all the constraints, just like we did for the left side, and all the fingers should be rotating. Let's try it. So select all the controller bones and press RX. And yeah, they seem to be working just fine. Yeah, they do bend a bit weird upwards. That's not a word. But yeah, they bend a bit too much upwards. We could add some limiting constraints to this, but I feel like sometimes it's good to have this kind of exaggerated bending, and it could be kind of cool when you're making, if you're trying to make like a stylized animation, or you're trying to make like kind of like an extreme pose or something like that. It's kind of useful to have this kind of finger bending that goes beyond realistic bending, you know. It's kind of useful to have that. So we're gonna keep that, I think. And just like we did for the left side, we also need to lock the bones. So lock the locations and the scales. So select each bone and lock the locations and the scales. You can also left click and drag here to make it a bit faster, so you can just hold down left click and drag. And we also want to lock the hand scale and the rotation and scale of this one, the pole target. And lastly, we want to lock the scale of this one. And make sure to save. It's very important to save. and make backups too. Always make backups. You never know what's gonna happen. But yeah. And that's it for the constraints. We have now added the IK. We can rotate the hand, we can move the hand, and the whole arm follows. We can move the upper arm. We can change the pole target. All right, and that's it for this lecture. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.